Hello everyone, welcome to ENK Academy. My name is Ernest and today's video is about an introduction to fractions. Are you a parent willing to explain to your child what a fraction is? Or are you a child or a student willing to learn more about fractions? Please stay tuned, subscribe, and let us learn together and be empowered. So for this introduction to fractions, we will cover a couple of learning objectives. After this video, you should be able to explain what a fraction is. You should be able to classify fractions. You should be able to simplify fractions. And you should be able to convert between fractions and mixed numbers. So how do we define a fraction? So we are used to whole objects. If we have one circle, 2, 3, 4, it's actually easy to count them as 1, 2, 3, 4. If we imagine that these circles are pizza, then of course we can say as whole object we have 4 pizza. So what about when we only have a single pizza and then we need to share? How can we then represent the parts of pizzas? So imagine you have a object, a single one, and then you divide it into two equal parts. You have two equal parts in this case, and then you choose to have just one part. Then we'll say you have selected one out of the two parts. The same way, if we have a single object and then we only have, we want to look at a single part as well, we will say that we are taking one out of three, or we can also imagine that we want to take two parts and leave one. That means we will have 2 out of 3 parts. So in other terms, if we have 4 of them, we can also say we can either use a single part, which is 1 out of the 4 parts, or we can also be greedy and say that we want to take 3 out of 4 parts. And this is how fraction, or how a fraction is defined. A fraction is part of a whole. So you take part of the whole which is divided in equal parts. But it can also be part of a region or part of a group. Imagine that your group of an orange and an apple constitute a single whole. That means if you take only the orange, that becomes part of a group, and we can also talk about fraction. So the question is, how do we represent it mathematically? So if we see equal parts and then let's say we choose a single part out of the 4, then we can say instead of writing 1 out of 4, we can actually say 1 over 4, which is provided here as the number of selected parts divided by the total number of equal parts. That means in this case we have 1, which is here, and then we have the total number, which is 4, and the number which is above the bar is called the numerator, and then the number below is called the denominator. So in this case, we will have 1 over 4, and then 1 is the numerator, and then 4 is the denominator. And this is how functions are defined mathematically. So we can actually look at those elements in front of us, and we can easily say, if we go for the colored part, we will say in this case we have 1 over 4. In this case we have 2 parts that are selected over 4. In this one we have 3 parts over 4, and then in this one here we have 4 parts over 4, which is basically just equal to 1. If we want to dig a bit more, as we saw previously, we are shading one part, and then we have 1 over 4, and because the numerator is less than the denominator, this one is called a proper fraction. So a proper fraction is defined as the fraction where the numerator is less than the denominator. On the other side, we see that we have 3 shaded parts out of 4, and then we also have 4 shaded parts. That means we actually have in total 7 parts that are colored divided by the equal part of each whole. That means in this case we talk about improper fraction because the numerator is greater than or equal to the denominator. So staying within the improper fractions where the numerator is greater than or equal to the denominator, we can also introduce the concept of mixed number. We see in this case here where we have 2 parts, we have 2 color parts here and then 4 here, which gives us 6 over 4. This means that we have 2 parts that is from one whole plus another one written like this, and we know that 4 divided by 4 is equal to 1. That means this one can be written as 1 over 2, 4. I am not simplifying here because we will learn simplification later on in this video. The same way, if we have 7 over 4, this just means that for this part here we have 3 over 4, and for the other part we have 4 over 4, which is 1, and this can be written as 1, 3 over 4. So a mixed number is made of a whole number, in this case 1, and a fractional part, in this case 3 over 4. So how do we classify fractions? So if the numerator is less than the denominator, for example 1 over 3, we talk about proper fraction, and this should be represented as it is, 1 over 3. When the numerator is equal to the denominator, 3 over 3, we talk about improper fraction, but then because this is equal to 1, this becomes a whole number. However, if the numerator is greater than the denominator, we talk about improper fraction and can be represented as a mixed number, in this case 1 over 3. We can also define equivalent fractions. Look at this one here. We have 1 colored part over 2 parts. Here we have 2 colored parts over 4. Here we have 4 over 8. We can actually multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number without changing the value of the fraction. We can also do it here, 2 by 2, and then we have 4 over 8. That means those fractions have the same value, and that is why they are equivalent. So equivalent fractions are fractions with different numbers representing the same part of a whole. They have different numerators and denominators, but their fractional values are the same. So how do we then simplify fractions? Imagine Papa eats 10 parts out of 20, and then the son eats 15 parts out of 30. We can try to simplify to see if those ratios are the same. In this case, we can have 10 over 20, and then we can say, oh, 10 can be divided by 5, then 10 divided by 5 is 2, 20 divided by 5 is 4. The same way we can say, oh, 2 can be divided by 2. If we divide by 2, we have 1 over 2. The same in this case, we can have 15 over 30. We can see that 15 can be divided by 5. If we divide by 5 in the numerator and the denominators, if you do that, then you do not change the value of the fraction. Then we have 3 over 6. We can still divide by 2, so by 3 for both sides, and then we have 1 over 2. As you can see, those after simplifying, we find out that those two fractions are equivalent, and that means they have got the same size of pizza. So a fraction is in the lowest terms when the greatest common factor, I will explain this one, of the numerator and denominator is 1. That means a fraction cannot be simplified anymore. In this case here, you have the factors of 1 is 1, the factors of 2 is 1 and 2. That means they have the common factor, which is 1. You can also say, for example, 3 and 4. 3 have factors 1 and 3, and then 4 has factors 1, 2, and 4. And then the common factor is only 1, and it is the greatest common factor. So meaning, the greatest common factor of a set of numbers is the largest factor that all the numbers share. For example, if you have 12, 20, and 24, 12 will have factors 1, 2, 3, 6, and 12, and then 20 will have factors 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20, and 24 will have factor of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, you also have 12, and then you have 24. So the common factors here are these ones, and then you also have, I forgot 4 here. You also have 4, which is common to all, and the greatest of them is 4, and that is why 4 is the greatest common factor of 12, 20, and 24. An example of reducing a fraction to lowest terms. So simplify 6 over 72 to lowest terms. What we do in step 1 is to find the greatest common factor of the numerator and denominator. That means of 60 and 72. If we look at the factors of 60, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 60, and the factors of 72, we have 1, 2 up to 72. That means if we look at the common factors, that will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we also have 6 here. We have 12 as well, and that's it. That means the greatest common factor is 12. We can then divide 60 by 12, also divide 72 by 12. What we get is 5 over 72 divided by 12 over 6. And this is the simplified fraction. We can try out this one. We can have the factors of 35 as 1, 5, 7. And then the coming one will be 35. If we get the factors of 49, that will be 1, and then we can have as well 7, and then we have 49, and then the greatest common factor will be 7, and we can then say 35 divided by 7, 49 divided by 7 equals 5 over 7, and this is the lowest term of this fraction, also the simplified fraction. So how do we compare fractions? In case where two fractions have like denominators, for example, you have 2 over 4 and 1 over 4, you just have to compare the numerators, and because 2 is greater than 1, we will say 2 over 4 is greater than 1 over 4. The same way, if we have 3 over 7, we want to compare it with 5 over 7, we will say they have like denominators, which can only compare the numerators, and that is why 3 over 7 is less than 5 over 7. So this is actually a very easy way to compare fractions with like denominators. But we also have cases where we have unlike denominators. How do we then compare fractions with unlike denominators? We need to convert these fractions to equivalent fractions with a common denominator in order to compare them more easily. For example, we have 3 over 4 should be compared to 2 over 3. As we can say, the common denominator could easily just be the product of the two. That means if I say 3 over 4 are multiplied by 3 both cases, that will give me 9 over 12. The same way here we can multiply by 4, that will give me 8 over 12. And now they have like denominators, and because 9 is greater than 8, that means 9 over 12 is greater than 8 over 12. So this example works out great, but then how do we know to use 12 as our common denominator? It turns out that the least common denominator is the best choice for comparing fractions. So the least common denominator, or LCD, is of two or more non-zero denominators is the smallest whole number that is divisible by each of the denominators. For example, if we say that what are the multiples of 3, we know that we can count 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and so on. And what are the multiples of 4? Because we have the fraction 3 over 4. We can count them. We have 4, 8, we have 12, we have 16, and so on. And we can see that the common multiple, the least common multiple is 12. That is why 12 is chosen as the value where we need to bring the denominator to be like, so that it is easy to compare two fractions. So let's compare 5, 8 and 7 over 10. So we need first to find the least common multiple between 8 and 10. And if we look at the multiples of 8, we have 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64, 72, 80, and so on. The multiples of 10 are 10, 20, 30, 60, 70, 80, 90. As you can see here, that 40 will be the least common multiple, and that is why we can bring those two denominators to be equal to 40. The first one will be 8 times 5 times 5, that is 25 divided by 40. The second one is 10 times 4 times 4. This will be 28 divided by 40. As we can see that 25 over 40 is less than 28 over 40. And this is how easily we can do comparison between two fractions. So the last topic is about converting fractions to mixed numbers. So if you have an improper fraction, for example 4 over 3, what you do, you make the division and then you take the remainder. For example, if you say 4 divided by 3, that will be 1, and then remainder of 1. And the way you write it, you take the result, which is 1, and then the remainder will be here, divided by the denominator. Let's say we have 17 over 3. This is an improper fraction that we want to convert into a mixed number. We can say first 17 divided by 3, that will be 5 times, this is 15, minus 2, and then we have the 5, that means this one can be written as 5, and the remainder 2 divided by 3, and this is our mixed number. We are also able to convert mixed numbers to fractions. If we have 2 1/4, to convert it into a fraction, you multiply the denominator by the whole number, and then you add the numerator. So multiply denominator by the whole number, and then you add the numerator. This is the way you can convert from mixed number to fraction. In this case, that will be 4 times 2 plus 1, everything over 4, which gives 9/4. If we have, for example, 5, we have 3/4. We first multiply 4 by 5, which is 20, plus 3, that will be 23 divided by 4. And this topic should conclude the introduction to fractions, and then more advanced elements will come later. Thank you very much for staying and watching this video to support ENK Academy. I hope I've been able to provide you an introduction to fractions and more advanced topics on how to do operations with fractions will be coming very soon. Please stay tuned, subscribe to this channel, and be empowered.